Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Invest This podcast. I am your host, Scott Bauer. I'm excited today. We're going to have a jam-packed episode full of some really cool investment strategies here with Chris Larsen. Chris, how are you?
I'm terrific, Scott. Thanks for having me on the show today.
And I'm excited, I think, for a few reasons. We share some common interests in the multifamily space, in the financial freedom space, and I think we'll definitely touch on that today. But why don't you go ahead and give the listeners a little bit more about your background, where you come from, and what you're focused on now?
Yeah, well, thanks for the opportunity, Scott. So I've been investing in real estate for over 20 years, as I mentioned in my book. We just released it about a month ago here on Amazon, but everybody can go to my website, nextlevelincome.com, and get a free copy if they'd like. So I'll try to paraphrase what I write about in the book. But I was in college. I was racing my bicycle, and I started racing at age 14. And that really led me to investing because I wanted to race a bicycle. And for anybody that knows a sport, racing a bicycle as a professional doesn't make a lot of money. So I had kind of some other things that I was doing on the side, and always had an entrepreneurial streak. I started selling wrapping paper when I was 12 years old. I had a paper route. I had a lawn service, where I'd make like $300, $400, $500 on the weekends in high school. In college, I had a loft business, so I would collect lofts at the end of the school year, and then at the beginning of the year, I'd sell them. I'd make about $10,000 the first weekend in college, which was always a nice way to start the year off. So I was able to buy nice TV, a car, and people were like, "Oh man, he's got rich parents." And as I talk about in my book, I grew up in a very blue collar, working class neighborhood. My father passed away when I was 5 years old. We went on Social Security. My mother remarried my stepfather, great man, who was a contractor, and they had a few rental properties. So I kind of knew about real estate, but I was introduced to the stock market and compound interest, that concept, in college by the same man, family friend Clint, who introduced me to cycling. So I started investing, and started day trading in the stock market specifically. And I was making sometimes $5,000 a month in college, day trading. And that was terrific, except for the months that I didn't make 5,000. I was losing 5,000 at times. And over the course of that experience, I thought, man, what if the numbers were 10 or 100 times bigger? And instead of being 20 years old, I was 40 years old. And, how would that affect me and my family? In that process, I also quit racing. My best friend had passed away, and it was kind of a crazy time in the cycling world. It was in the late 90s, the Armstrong era, and I had friends that were going to Europe and coming back and telling me stories. And I say I was lucky because I wasn't good enough to have to make those decisions. I was decent enough to be pro, but I wasn't good enough to go to Europe and be faced with the choices that a lot of those guys had to make.
Sure.
So I made the decision that I wanted to be an investor for the freedom that it would provide. And even though I quit racing, I still had that desire to do what I wanted to do and live life on my own terms, whether that was racing a bicycle or choose a career or live where I wanted to live, or travel. And I bought my first property at age 21. For less than $3,000 down. I had my mom co-sign on the loan with me. It was a 3-bedroom townhouse. It was kind of a house hack, if you will. I rented out the 2 bedrooms. So I was living for free. I was getting some great depreciation benefits, which I could write off at the time. And
Sure.
then bought the place next door and built a portfolio from there. But after about 15 years of that, and being a professional at the time, I was on call, working sometimes 7 days a week. I was on call for 12 hours of my life as a medical device professional. And I was paying off these properties. And when I took a pause in my life at age about 35, after I had 2 boys, I was making like 5, 6, 7% on these properties. I realized there had to be a better way. And I was introduced to multifamily real estate. And long story short, I sold my entire portfolio, started investing in multifamily, and syndicated my first deal about 5 years ago, and haven't looked back.
It's a common thread around a lot of people that I talk to, when they get into the multifamily space, they really start doing their deals. I think there's a big hurdle, and it's not a real hurdle. It's a mental hurdle that every individual has to get over in order to get into the multifamily space, right? But
Absolutely.
what I want to talk about is I want to back it up a little bit, because you were selling medical device, and you went to school for biomedical engineering. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So going to school as a biomedical engineer and then transitioning from selling medical, I mean, when you're in sales, you're in sales, right? But if you're doing medical
That's right.
device sales, you can make a really good living that way. And so
Absolutely.
what was the mindset shift that you had to make that said, no, that wasn't going to work for me? I'm not going to make a couple hundred grand a year. I want to go make a couple $1 million a year, or I want to have the cash flow, you know, how did that work for you? And I'm asking the
Yeah.
question for the listeners out there that are struggling with the same thing that you might have been struggling with at that same time.
Yeah, that's a great question. And for me, Scott, I actually made the decision that I wanted to be an investor, and I kind of glossed over this when I was 20 years old. And the challenge is I didn't have much money. Saying, "Oh, I made $10,000 in a weekend in college." That's a lot of money in college, but that's not a lot of money if you want to live, have a family, and invest.
Right.
So I didn't come from money. My family, we had enough to be comfortable, but that was like the limit.
Mhm.
Um, so I knew I had to find a career where I could make a lot of money. So I'd go on the weekends, and I've always been. We were talking about this before the show. A big reader, as are you. And in college, when I started down this path, I read 250 books on investing and real estate and went to seminars. And I'd literally drive down to Borders in Christiansburg, Virginia, down the road from Virginia Tech. I just sit there and read. Sometimes I read 2, 3 books in an afternoon, just sitting in the bookstore, drinking a cup of coffee. And I was reading a book and it was talking about like 100 careers where you can make $100,000, something like that. And something that always popped up was sales. And again, if you want freedom, I think there's no better career than sales because you can sell anything, you can sell anywhere if you want to.
Right.
And I thought, oh man, it'd be cool to sell insurance or real estate or work on Wall Street. And I went down that path. I got an MBA in finance, specifically in portfolio management. I love finance. I love looking at spreadsheets, almost did a PhD in it. But I was working for State Farm and I was selling insurance and financial products while I was finishing my MBA, while I had my real estate license and was selling real estate. And my agent that I worked for said, "You need to meet a friend of mine. He sells implants, orthopedic implants." So I met him. He told me what he did, what he sold, what he made. And I thought, I looked at him across the table, Scott, and I said, how do I do this? So I went down that path, and it's been a career I've loved. I've done it for 15 years. I still manage a sales team in the space and spine implants specifically. So for me, I started out with an investor mindset before I actually went out and got a job. So what I would say to people that are in the space and they're in a career that maybe or a job that maybe they don't like, my advice to them would be find an investing path that you're passionate about and that you're interested in. That will give you the motivation to make the money to put into that space. And if you can develop, a knowledge or passive income, or maybe a side hustle where you have that income coming in, if you have that why that's strong enough, then you'll have the motivation to make that happen and ultimately have the option to either quit or do something else if you want to.
So basically, you took the career in medical device sales and you converted it into an investment by building out a team that now is running that for you. Is
Yeah,
that
in a way. So I moved. Yeah, I moved from about 4 years ago. I moved from being a sales rep where I was covering cases every day in, day out. Like I said, sometimes 7 days a week, to more a managerial role where I have more control over my time, and I can operate more in the investment space as well.
definitely? Well, and I think that's a great point. I really haven't heard anybody talk about that, where you can take a job that you're working in, and then converting it into kind of your own little business. Even though you don't necessarily own the business, you can own that part of the operation, right? So if you
Yeah.
the listeners out there that may be listening to this that are in a similar position, right? You can build, maybe they're in medical device sales. Okay, well, what happens if you build out a team underneath of you that go do all of the hard lifting, heavy lifting, all the actual, going out and meeting with clients, going to meet with doctors, etc., and you're just managing them. Now all of a sudden you put yourself, like you said, you got your time back, right? Which is beautiful. I love that.
That's right. Yeah,
So
and I think I'm sorry.
no,
Uh,
go ahead.
Yeah, I think a great question to ask, and this can apply to any area of your life. I kind of and and I think I got it from the 4 Hour Work Week with Tim Ferriss.
Yep.
But ask yourself what you're doing. Is this scalable? Like, can I multiply this times 2, times 10, times 100? And if the answer is no, then say, can I do this differently? So if you're one person, if you're a surgeon and you get paid to do a surgery, how many surgeries can you do at a time? One surgery. You might get paid $500,000 a year to do that. Is there a way for that surgeon to multiply? What if he can become an owner in a surgery center and he can take a little piece of all the surgeries that are being done and he can have his income from operating? Now he's scaling his expertise. For me, getting to mentor a sales team, I might not make as much money from every quote unquote unit that's sold, but I get a little piece of it. And what I found, Scott, is I found a love. I've always loved coaching and sharing my knowledge, which is the whole reason that we started the Next Level Income brand and the website and podcast. But I found a new passion for my career by being able to share what I was doing, where frankly, I was burned out. I didn't want to do what I was doing anymore.
So that led you to where you're at today, which is now you're an investor. You're also managing these people. So let's I guess go down that path. How did that get started? You own some rental properties when you were younger. You kind of transitioned out of that. Do you still own that rental portfolio of houses?
So I sold every
That's
single
right.
family home that I had. That was, I think we sold the last one in 2015.
Okay.
Started in 2012, and we started to roll those investments into commercial and mostly multifamily. We do have a commercial office in downtown Asheville, and we have like our own personal residence, which has hybrid vacation rental on the property, which one of those helped to fund as well. But yeah, from 2015 on, we've been entirely in the commercial and more specifically the multifamily space.
So what does somebody have to wrap their head around to do that, right? Some people
Mhm.
love having a portfolio of 500 houses, right? But let's talk about that for a little bit. Why would somebody not want to do that? Why would somebody not want to have a rental portfolio of houses like that? Please
Sure.
enlighten us.
Yeah. So from somebody that didn't have 500, had a multiple less than that, um, I can get so getting phone calls on your honeymoon. That's reason number one. Getting having returns that aren't scalable and go down over time. I think one of the things is, um, you know, you start with 5 homes. Next thing you know, you have 15 or 20 or 50. And look, if you love it, that's terrific. There's a lot of pluses, a lot of minuses. I'm always looking for the best way to do things, and I'm always looking for how can you, like I was saying, how can you scale, but how can you also decrease risk? So for me, being in the commercial or multifamily space is a great way to do that. I was talking to actually a potential investor this morning. He called me, our first conversation. He's in his late 20s. He's in the medical device industry. He's starting to make good money. He loves what he's doing, and he's talking about buying his first property. He said, "Well, what advice do you have for me?" And I gave him some basic advice. One of the things, again, that I'm a big proponent of is the infinite banking concept, and people can go on our website to learn about that as well. So I told him to explore that, but then I said, "Listen," I said, "Look, think about what you're really interested in. Go in bigger pockets. Listen to shows like yours, Scott, and say, hey, is this an area that interests me? Like, do I like swinging a hammer? Do I like making my own repairs? Do I like operations or operation heavy industries? Look at what your skill set is. If you're a nurse, maybe you go into senior housing, might be something. If you are a contractor, maybe you do fix and flips where you can do that. My wife's an architect. We built spec homes. That was a good fit for us. I could finance the deals. I love that piece. She designed the homes, and we had a builder partner and a realtor partner. Maybe your wife's a realtor, so you can get good deals in the residential space. I think it's a combination of looking at what you enjoy and what your skill set is, and looking in the mirror and being honest with yourself, and deciding, like, is this, like, what do I really want to be doing in 10 years? I mean, if you love the thought of going around with a gun in your waist belt, like my friend's father-in-law in Roanoke, and collecting rents from low income housing, and doing repairs on your own when you're 50, 60, 65 years old, maybe that's for you. What I can tell you is his son-in-law is selling that portfolio when he inherits it, because there's no chance he's going around collecting rents with a gun in his back pocket.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of people think that you have to be that way, right? That you have to be that slumlord, that landlord out there that
No.
has, has to go for the low income housing, which you don't have to do that at all. I
Yeah,
mean, not even close, right? And you don't even have to be the one
that's right.
that does it with technology today. You can have a management company that manages it for you, whatever, right? But
Exactly.
for you and for the listeners out there, why multifamily? I mean, I've had a lot of guests on the show that have been in the multifamily space. I'm in the multifamily space myself. I enjoy it, but I want to know what your reasons are and why would somebody else that's listening to this podcast right now want to think about multifamily real estate?
Mhm. So I think like an engineer, I was trained that way,
Okay.
and I'm a data guy. So I think like, okay, what are the assumptions going into this space? So for me, I say, all right, why would somebody want to go into real estate? And you look at that. So saying, okay, the assumption is multifamily is a good investment. Let's see if this is true. Let's see if the assumptions hold up. So I start to peel back the onion, and what I found when I looked at this space, what's driving it? Demographics. So you have millennials that are renting. You have baby boomers that are selling their houses that are renting. 75% roundabout of immigrants are renting. Millennials are strapped with student debt. Baby boomers need money for retirement, so they're tapping into equity by selling their homes. People are more mobile. We're using Zoom technology now. You can work from different places. People realized after the Great Recession that maybe a home isn't as great of an investment as we once thought it was, and it only goes up with inflation, not 20% a year like we got carried away with. So I think the demographic trends are terrific. We need something like 4 million units this decade alone, about 350 to 400,000 units per year that need to come online. And this COVID crisis is going to slow that down, and really, the demand's not going to stop. So one, the demographics are super strong. The fundamentals are super strong. Two, what area? You're in Phoenix, Arizona. It's a great market out there, in my opinion. Texas is a great market. The Southeast is a great market. So if you say, hey, this is a great space to be in, what other markets are going to be a great space to be in, and look at that. And then you get to the deal and you look at the fundamentals and the financials. And what I found with multifamily, and let's contrast it with the single family, since that's what I did and what we were
Yep.
just
Yep.
talking about.
And typical for a lot of people, right? Yep.
Yeah, and it's a great place to start. If you're 21 years old and you have $3,000 in your bank account, like I did, you know, I can buy a $90,000 townhouse in that circumstance. I don't know if I can buy, a $51 million apartment complex in that scenario. There's probably a 21-year-old out there that's done it. Please reach out to me. I'd love to hear your story. But the point being, so if you said, okay, if I could own either 200 homes or a 200 unit apartment complex, which would I want and why? First off, you can hire a management company to do both. The chance of you buying all 200 houses at once is pretty low. You could buy a portfolio, but it's pretty low. It's probably going to be a lot of transactions, right? You can buy more units at once, so you have less transactions. The barriers to entry are higher. I like high barriers to entry because that means you're going to be competing with less people. So that's from an acquisitions perspective. From a benefits perspective, scalability perspective, if you have 200 homes, somebody's got to travel all over the place to all those homes to collect rent, to do maintenance, to do that. So even if you have a team to do it, it's going to take more people. You can have a smaller team, a very efficient team, if you have an apartment complex to do that. And there's a lot of really competent management companies out there, if you don't want to do it yourself, that can handle that for you. The other thing is, when you look at the way it's valued, and this is super important. I talk about this in my book. So if you're living in a house and it's let's say a 1,500 square foot home, and it's valued at $300,000, it's about $200 a square foot. How did you come up with that number? Chances are your neighborhood, it's
Yep.
about $200 a square foot, right, Scott?
Yep.
You know this very well. Well, how is that 200 unit apartment complex valued? It's valued on what's called the net operating income. And what I love about multifamily, commercial, but really multifamily, is that you can control the appreciation. And I write about in my book being on a roller coaster going through 08, 09, 2010, and then coming out of that. And I like roller coasters, but not when my money's we're taking that roller coaster ride or my net worth in that case. So you can control their appreciation. So as you drive net operating income up, assuming the cap rate stays about the same, you're driving the value of that property up, which is fantastic. You can actually control it. And the neat thing is, not only can you control it by improving the property and driving rents up, you can keep rents about the same. You can increase other operating income, and you can also decrease expenses. One of the things I love is installing, efficient systems like low flow toilets, or low flush toilets, uh, shower heads, fixing leaks, and those sorts of things that are great for the environment. I convinced my church to start recycling when I was 11 years old. I love doing things that are great for the environment. And what's cool is you save money. Financing companies give you better breaks on that as well. And then, let's say you've had a property for 5 years, you've increased the value of it, and you say, this is great. Like, I want to sell this 200 unit apartment complex. If you want to sell 200 houses, that's a pain in the butt. If you sell them as a portfolio, you're probably not going to get market value for them. You can sell with one transaction a 200 unit apartment complex. You can do a 1031 exchange, keep your money whole, and move it into another apartment complex. But the great thing is, the whole way as you're making money with that place, while you're collecting income, while you're getting checks every month, every quarter that are coming in, they're probably offset by the depreciation. So not only can you avoid taxes by doing a 1031 exchange, I'm sorry, I should say delay taxes. We don't want to avoid taxes. We want to, yeah, we want to delay taxes or minimize them. But the other thing is, through depreciation, we can potentially delay taxes on that income. And the neat thing is, if you structure your investments and specifically your personal life well, you can delay those taxes indefinitely. So, when I look at the fundamentals, when I look at the day-to-day scalability of multifamily, and then when I look at the overall risk-adjusted returns overlaid with those tax benefits, for me, this is why I call it the holy grail of real estate, Scott.
Yeah, it's exactly what it is for sure, and I think that there's a lot of other benefits to it as well. Each individual house has its own individual taxes, insurance. You have to pay for different pieces. From a maintenance standpoint, are going to go out, which you don't have that when you have a 200 unit apartment complex. You have one roof. It's a big roof, but you have one roof, ideally, right?
Yep.
There's a lot of really good things, and I think that what I wanted to get into next was how this COVID-19 thing is affecting your apartment complexes and how it might, differ from somebody that has houses instead. So let's take a shift and talk about that for just a quick minute. I mean, what are you experiencing in that space?
A great question. So I was talking to my accountant yesterday, and we have some mutual friends that are very high performing realtors in the area. And these are ones that are top producers in March, and they had great Marches, they had pretty good Aprils, and they have nothing on the books. These are residential real estate agents. So I think from a home perspective, a transaction perspective, it's tough kind of across the board. For what we're experiencing, it depends. And what I say is, my portfolio, it spans from properties that were built in the early 70s all the way up to 2014, which is our current acquisition that will be closing in here towards the end of May. And what we're seeing is collections are actually pretty strong coming out of the beginning of April. So as we record this, we're in the second week of April. Collections across the board, I was reading this morning, are in the high 80s
Yep.
across the board. Now, what I will say is, the lower you go on the spectrum, so if you're looking at, and if your audience may know this, so like a C-class property, so say a property built in the 70s, rents are maybe $800 a month, something like that. These are people that are shift workers. They're working in factories. They're working in industrial centers. They may not be able to go to work. Maybe they're a waitress or waiter, and they've been, their restaurant's been shut down. They're not collecting anything. They're maybe waiting for that $1,200 check in the mail. They're going to be disproportionately affected, in my opinion. So those properties distributions have been suspended in some cases. And I say suspended, not that those properties aren't making money, but we're taking a defensive stance in those cases.
Mhm.
You take the other end of the spectrum, you walk your way up to an A-class property where you have people that are making on average 80, 90, $100,000 a year. These people are able to work remotely. Their jobs may not be affected. I was talking to somebody this morning. His wife works in digital marketing, and one of her clients is TurboTax, and she's inundated with work right now.
Oh
My
yeah.
wife's an architect,
Yeah.
and people are staying at home, and it's amazing that people are calling her during the COVID crisis and saying, "Hey, can I book you to remodel my home?" And she got 4 new clients in the past 4 weeks, which I was really surprised. So I think it depends. I think for anybody that doesn't think this is going to have an impact, that's patently false. This is absolutely going to have an impact across the board. I think, again, like I've said, looking at a portfolio that's pretty diverse over the last 40 years with respect to construction, the lower you go, the more adversely impacted it is. You have to take a defensive stance. I think the more stable the property is, the higher up on the food chain it is, and the higher your average income is with your residents is going to be helpful during this time.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I mean, I'm a B class. If I'm going to talk about my personal stance when it comes to apartment complexes, B assets are my ideal, because
Yep.
you're right in the middle. You don't have the upper echelon of prices for your units, but you're also not at the bottom. You probably have the most diversification of people that can afford them, and people that, I mean,
All day long.
it's a true middle class kind of thing. So,
Yep.
a lot of room for improvement. A lot of times you can get great deals on those things, and have a lot of room for appreciation and growth. Right.
Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely. And that's the bulk of our portfolio as well, is, somewhere in the B range,
yep.
built in the last 30 years. And I think it's a great place to be. And I was just looking back through some data here, about an hour ago at the Great Recession, and what performed the best. And it was those B class assets. And that goes back, 20 years, and also through the Great Recession as well.
Absolutely. So,
Yeah.
being now a multifamily investor, you're also an author. I mean, what's next for you? What are you going to do? How do you see yourself coming out of this, and how can the Invest This podcast help you get there?
Well, thank you, Scott. Yeah. So, it's interesting, when I've been through some challenges in my life. I mentioned a couple of them here. Again, people can read my book and kind of learn a little bit more about my story. But my best friend died, and my mother, she'd have these comments, and during a particularly tough time in my life, she said, she reminded me of it. She said, you told me, Chris, that uh, right now is challenging, but it's for the best. And, basically you'd make the best out of it. When my father died when I was 5, she said that, I turned to her and I said, "Mom, it's okay. He's with Jesus now." And so I think, from when I was young, experiencing these challenges, and knowing that these are times where you can either grow, or you can fall down. I think it's not how many times you get knocked down, Scott, it's how many times you get up. So right now I'm using this time to really improve on the things that I have control over. I wrote a ebook 2 years ago, and when this whole COVID shutdown started, I said, this is the time I'm going to publish the book. So I updated it, got it published. And my mission right now is to distribute as many copies as possible. I'm doing a giveaway during the shutdown. So anybody that's listening to this show, go to our website. You can get a free print copy. I'll send it to you. I'll sign it if you want, on there. So with the next level income that we started about 2 years ago, my mission is to help as many people achieve financial independence. So I kind of touched on this earlier. I don't care whether you're a professional or you're an entrepreneur or you're a real estate investor. I believe that if you're financially independent, you can follow your true passions in life, and you can ultimately help the most people that you're meant to help with your skill set. So what's next for me is to continue to spread the message, to help as many people as possible. I mentioned earlier that a big passion of mine is the infinite banking concept. I started policies about 10 years ago, right before my first son was born. When my father passed away, he had a couple life insurance policies, which really allowed us to just sustain our life when we were younger. And we're going to add that element. So if anybody wants to learn more about that concept, we have a webinar that was just launched under the banking link on our page. They can learn about that. And I think that's something that can help anybody, whether you're 20 years old or, 60 years old, whether you're a real estate investor or just a professional that's looking for some stability. One of the first things I did during the COVID crisis, during the shutdown a month ago, was I called my agent and I asked for some money to be transferred into my bank account. And 5 days later, I had the liquidity that I needed. That's going to make sure my family and I can not only make it to the end of the year, but I can also pay all my bills for my commercial properties, which meant that I'm able to help out my tenants that are in downtown Asheville that were shut down by the health department. So again, it's something that I think is a really valuable tool in good times and in bad. And that's something that I started to focus on recently here.
So it sounds like, I mean, you're using this time, and what's next for you is you're out there to give. You're out there to provide value for people and allow them to move their life forward even more than they already are, which is great. I love to hear that. It's been an exciting time having you on the show here today. There's been a lot of knowledge on why multifamily is probably the better option from an investment standpoint. I think your mission that you're doing is great to help people just understand financial literacy, right? And to understand what tools are out there for them that they can help their families really move forward. And just for the listeners out there, if you've stuck with us so far, make sure that you do check the show notes. You can get a copy of his book and take advantage of it. I mean, it's free. He's offering it to you for free right now, right? That's what you're doing.
Absolutely. Yep,
so,
100%.
I love free. I don't know about everybody else, but make sure to get out there, check the show notes below. There's going to be all the data and details that you need to find all the information he puts out there for you. And are you ready for a lightning round?
I am, Scott. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay. First question is, how important do you feel your mindset is to the success of your business and your life?
I think it's critical. I think it's like, your thoughts. I tell my boys, your thoughts become your words, become your actions.
Right.
And I start every day by meditating to slow my body down, allow my mind to get in the right place. And if I don't have 15 or 20 minutes to sit there and meditate, I'll sit there for 2 minutes and I'll breathe and make sure that my mind's in the right spot. When I was doing cold calls, I'd smile before I made every phone call just to get the endorphins flowing. And there's some great research out there. So mindset is critical.
Yeah. I mean, I ask this to all my guests because I want to understand everybody's take on it. And almost every time they say almost, similar thing, it's critical. Your mindset is what directs your life and directs what you're going to do each and every second of every day. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Appreciate that. You mentioned you're an avid reader. Obviously you're an author. So what is the last book you read and what did you learn from it?
Aside from my book, I proofread it, I think 100 times before it went to print. And somebody pointed out to me yesterday that there's two minor typos. And I thought, oh my gosh, how did I, you just think like, how did I miss this after all these times? But I just finished a book called The Spider Network, which talks about the LIBOR fixing scandal. So I love financial history. I love Michael Lewis. He's my favorite author when it comes to writing about things. Really fascinating story. And I thought it was very timely to read something like that, which kind of unfolded during the last financial crisis. And I thought, this is probably good to read right now. I might be able to learn something as we're going through not the same, but another financial setback in this country.
Absolutely. Well, that kind of leads to the next question, which is, what are you trying to learn right now?
Yes. So I am trying to learn how to do this a little bit better, Scott. I'm out here promoting my book, which is very new to me. Learning how to network among podcast hosts. And I think what you do is phenomenal. I think, being able to share knowledge among people and help more people. I just want to learn how to do this better. And again, how to communicate with as many people. And I tell my boys, if you want to make money, you need to help as many people as possible.
Right. That's absolutely true. Well, thank you for the compliment. I mean, I love having you on the show. This is where I get to build a network and build a relationship with you and allow the listeners to build relationships with both of us, even while we're sleeping. So that's a great thing. Do you have a superpower that allows you to thrive in your business or in your life?
You know what? I was thinking about this, and thank you for sending me the questions ahead of time, because I probably would stammer here a little bit if you asked me these on the spot. But I'm really grateful for this question, because it made me think what if I had a superpower, what is it? And I'm just a normal human being. But my wife tells me, she said, what's really interesting is the worse things get, the calmer you get. And I talked about this a little bit earlier. So I think that's really been something that's helped me throughout my life. spending time in the OR when the what was hitting the fan, people were yelling, things were being thrown or dropped, or just not non-optimal situations, shall we say. I always felt like my brain was calm and I was able to operate in that space, and I think that's what suits me. And if I have something that I'd call a superpower, that would be it.
Well, it is a superpower. I would say, you and I, just to comment on that, have something in common, which is the morning meditation. I do believe that
Yeah.
will allow you to keep your brain calm throughout the day and in stressful situations. So, I think that is a great superpower, and I appreciate you sharing that. How do you like to give back? Obviously, you're doing a lot of
Yeah.
value, or giving back a lot of value with everything you're doing with the book and with the resources on your site, etc. Is there something else you're doing?
I mean, we give back in a lot of ways. We give to local charities, which I enjoy doing.
Sure.
But really, what if there's something that I could do all day, every day for free, and I didn't have to do anything else, I really enjoy mentoring young individuals that are on their path and they're starting to, make money, or they're looking to achieve financial independence. But the reason we started the Next Level Income Show, our podcast, was to help the next generation learn about finances. I think we have a real lack of knowledge in this country when it comes to financial literacy. From somebody that has a master's degree in finance, this is like my language. It comes naturally. Like, I enjoy looking at spreadsheets, and I have an accountant now, but I enjoy even doing my taxes when I was doing it. So the three tenets of next level income are: make more money, keep more money, and grow your money. And I am very passionate about helping young people in every step of that process.
Yeah, that's a great little three-step process for sure, and I think it's applicable to everybody. You're doing great things by giving all that back and allowing people to come to you. Which brings me to my next question: is how can they reach you? Where can they find you at?
Yes, I've mentioned a couple times, nextlevelincome.com.
Okay.
Go to our website. You can contact me there. You can click around there on the links and get a free copy of the book, or just reach out to the about and reach out. But it's Chris at nextlevelincome.com.
Phenomenal. Well, we'll make sure all the listeners that have stuck with us up to this point, make sure to check out the show notes. We'll have all the links in there for you. I'm sure. Can they find you on social media everywhere? Can they find you Facebook, LinkedIn? Can they find you on those
Yep.
sites?
Yep, Facebook, LinkedIn, a little bit of Twitter. I'm a little on the older side for Twitter, but I'm trying to learn that. But again, yeah, check out the website. You can click through there and find us on all that. I try to post as much as I can on the websites every day to, again, help people learn more about what's going on in the world financially.
I love it, man. I love it. Well, be looking out for listeners to reach out to you. And Chris, thanks again for being here today. I think you really add a lot of value, and there's a lot of takeaways that people can get from this podcast on what to do to move forward. Some mindset shifts and hacks that they can use to continue to thrive in this business right now. And, for all you listeners that have stuck with us, make sure you like it, you share it with all your friends, you subscribe so you don't miss another episode with us. And I just want to thank everybody for being here today. Chris, thanks. Really appreciate it.
Scott, thank you. I really appreciate what you're doing for everyone out there. Keep it up.
Thanks, man. We'll talk to you real soon. See ya.
Thanks.